I will be talking about the Delphic Oracular Cavern in the imagination of Greek authors, paying close attention to what they believed the history of the oracle to be and what the cavern looked like spatially. There are various different foundation myths with regard to the Delphic oracle. The first one that I will explore is the account we have in the Homeric hymn to Apollo, whereby Apollo is seen as the founder. In this hymn, Apollo makes the descent from Mount Olympus and journeys through north and central Greece until he finds the place at Crissa under snowy Parnassus. Having laid his foundations on this site, Apollo slays the serpent that occupied the site, a great bloated creature, a fierce prodigy that caused much harm to the people in the land, for she was a bloody affliction. Thus, in the Homeric hymn, though the baneful serpent existed in the area, there is no suggestion that there was any previous occupant of a prophetic centre at Delphi. However, the slaying of the serpent is more significant than just the removal of a neighbouring nuisance. This serpent, following the motif of the serpent as the guardian of a Springer sanctuary, became the guardian of Gaia's oracle. Therefore, this is equivalent to the idea that Apollo slaying the serpent represents Apollo's takeover of the oracle from Gaia by force. This slaying can also be seen as a representation of the conflict between Apollo and Gaia for possession of the cult site. In Greek thought, serpents came out of the ground. This, plus the fact that this serpent is a female, suggests that the serpent in this myth was the visible manifestation of Gaia herself. The slaying of the serpent is thus representative of the violent and forceful takeover of the Delphic oracle from Gaia by Apollo. Gaia was Apollo's predecessor, and the latter's violent appropriation of the location resulted in his punishment by Zeus. This is a clear example of male appropriation of the female, which symbolises the replacement of vengeance and danger with order, law and purity, the new order of Delphic Apollo. Gaia's revenge on Apollo for his violent takeover of the oracle, plus her generation of various creatures to pester gods and men, is representative of the fact that she came from a cosmic era in which vengeance, and not regulated civilized law, was prevalent. In Greek thought, serpents came out of the ground. Within the foundation myths, the Greek authors explore the spatiality of the cavern. In their imagination, the oracular cavern is a deep, hollow space hidden from view, where the Pythian priestess could avoid contact with the outside world. Delphi was considered by Greeks to be at the centre of the universe, marked with a stone known as the navel, which, according to the theogony, was placed in the Delphic Oracular Cavern by Zeus as a marvel for mortals. This highlights the importance and centrality of Delphi and its oracle in the Greek imagination. Thus, the Delphic Oracular Cavern was imagined to be located beneath the earth, because in such an isolated location, sensory deprivation and inhalation of poisonous gases were made possible. The Pythian priestess had to be isolated from contact with strangers in order to prevent any emotion which would interfere with her function as Apollo's mouthpiece. Strabo writes that they say that the seat of the oracle is a cave that is hollowed out deep down in the earth, with a rather narrow mouth, from which arises breath that inspires a divine frenzy, and that over the mouth is placed a high tripod, mounting which the Pythian priestess receives the breath and then utters oracles. Here we see the metaphor of the cavern as a mouth. As a deep space, we can see the cavern as being a mouth which releases the divine breath, or pneuma, which was required for the inspired divination and possession of the Pythian priestess. As a hollow space, we can link the idea of cave as mouth to cave as womb, which will be explored below. In Aeschylus's Coephary, the Delphic Apollo is referred to as the god who lives at the great, well-built portal. Here the word for portal, stomion, is translated literally as mouth, and this term is normally identified with the Delphic sanctuary. Just as breath is released from the mouth, likewise the divine breath which brought about the frenzy of the Pythian priestess was released from the Delphic Oracular Cavern. Furthermore, the Greek term ktimenon, which means well-built, indicates that the Delphic Oracular Cavern was a man-made vault rather than a natural space in the earth, which implies that the cavern was intentionally built in a hollow space for the sake of releasing the divine breath necessary for inspiration. A contemporary of Strabo, known as Pseudo-Longinus, elaborates on the subject of divine breath in his treatise On the Sublime. The story runs that the Pythian priestess, on approaching the tripod where there is, they say, a rift in the earth, exhaling divine vapour, thereby becomes impregnated with the divine power and is at once inspired to utter oracles. This again suggests that the Delphic Oracular Cavern was an underground space which released a divine breath. It is interesting to note that Longinus views the possession of the Pythian priestess by the pneuma of Apollo as an impregnation. This forges a link between the cavern and the womb, which sets up the cavern as a generative female space that gives birth to oracles. In fact, the name Delphi means hollow or womb, which explicitly sets up the oracular cavern as a generative female space. Apollo's violent takeover of the oracle thus supports the cosmic idea of the male appropriation of the female's generative abilities. As cavities, the mouth and womb are linked to one another. In the Coephary, Apollo is called Loxias, who dwells in that great hollow of the Parnassian land. This location refers back to the Homeric hymn, where Apollo sets the foundations for his oracle at the place under snowy Parnassus. This shows a sense of consistency as to the location of the Delphic Oracular Cavern in the minds of Greek authors. The Greek term for hollow in this play is muchon, a term which occurs in the third play in the trilogy, the Eumenides, where Apollo demands, "Get out of the inner place of prophecy." The word muchos is translated as the inmost place, or nook, which highlights the hollow nature and seclusion of the Delphic Oracular Cavern, which was necessary, as has been identified, for the release of divine breath. The term muchos is used again in Euripides' Ion, translated as inmost recess. The frequent use of this Greek term by various Greek authors to connote the Delphic Oracular Cavern suggests that the cavern was deep inside the Temple of Apollo, a hollow space where encounters between God and human was made possible. It is possible that the depth of the Delphic Cavern can be seen as horizontal depth, the idea of going deep down by going deep inside. In Aeschylus's Agamemnon, Agamemnon's entry into the house of Atreus is somewhat like a descent into the underworld by going deep inside, a deep space, symbolic of the womb and generation. Thus a link is created between the idea of going deep in as a descent and the womb. Similarly, the Delphic Cavern can be seen as a womb due to its hollow nature. In Euripides' Iphigenia in Tauris, the Delphic Manteon, or oracle, is described as chthonion, or subterranean, which stresses that the Greek playwright visualized the Delphic Oracular Cavern, or aditon, as a vault, It is interesting to note that aditon literally means not to be entered, which shows the exclusivity of the cavern. The Homeric hymn uses the verb katadouse to connote the movement of Apollo into the aditon. The kata in front of the verb suggests movement down, and this downwards movement can also be seen in one of Pindar's Pythian odes, Puthion Nion Katabanta, when he descends into the temple at Pytho. The chthonic nature of the Delphic oracle, in the imagination of Greek authors, stresses the depth of the cavern, which was necessary in order for it to function optimally.